Welcome back, learners. You know, today's deep dive, it's kind of like a specially designed masterclass. For those of you who are getting ready for the UPSC exams,
Right.
especially if you have international relations as your optional subject.
Absolutely.
We're going to go deeper.
Yeah.
We're going to go beyond just the surface of Western political thought.
Yes.
And uncover some of the hidden layers that can really make a difference.
Make your answers stand out. In your answers. Yeah.
That's right.
So we are going to examine some of those big names.
Right.
You've been studying, your Plato, your Aristotle, your Machiavelli, and see how understanding where they might fall short can actually deepen your grasp of international relations.
So let's dive in.
Let's dive in.
We always say that to understand a thinker, you need to understand their context, right?
Absolutely.
It's like trying to interpret a painting or a piece of art without knowing anything about the artist or the time period that it was created in.
Exactly. So, for example, take Plato and Aristotle, for example. Their focus on the city-state, while groundbreaking for their time, excluded, a significant portion of the population and didn't account for the complexities of larger, more diverse societies. Can you imagine trying to apply their framework to a modern nation-state?
It would be like trying to fit the entire ocean into a teacup. And this whole idea of context is really crucial throughout the history of political thought.
Of course.
Machiavelli, for instance.
Yes.
He couldn't have predicted the massive changes that the Reformation brought about.
The seismic shifts.
The way that power structures were transformed by this huge religious and political upheaval. I mean, it just wasn't on his radar.
It wasn't something that he could have foreseen.
No.
And it's not just about historical events. It's also about the assumptions that are embedded within these theories. So Hobbes, with his rather bleak view of human nature as inherently self-serving and driven by a fear of death, claimed this was universal.
He said, this is it. This is the truth.
This is the truth.
This is human nature.
This is human nature.
Right.
But, anthropologists and sociologists would argue that human nature is...
It's much more complex than that.
Far more complex.
Yeah, and shaped by so many different factors.
A multitude of factors.
So even these thinkers who were searching for universal truths... They were still, in a way, prisoners of their own time and experiences.
Precisely. Even someone like Hegel, who was... brilliant in many ways, had limitations. His glorification of the state, while insightful, could be seen as downplaying the importance of individual rights and freedoms. You see?
It's amazing how even the most brilliant minds
can
have these blind spots. It's fascinating.
Take Marx, for example. His critique of capitalism, while influential,
very influential,
has been challenged by those who argue that he underestimated capitalism's ability to adapt and evolve.
And John Stuart Mill, who was such a champion
of individual liberty.
liberties. But he believed that representative democracy wouldn't actually work.
Wouldn't work effectively in all societies?
In all societies.
Yes. He argued that certain cultural and social conditions were necessary for it to truly thrive.
And this raises a really important question for UPSC aspirants.
Absolutely.
How do we assess the applicability of Western political models in all these diverse contexts?
And these diverse contexts that we see around the world.
That's a question I guarantee you will come up on the UPSC exam.
But will come up.
So to really do well on those international relations questions, it's not enough to just know the theories.
No.
You have to critically examine their limitations.
You have to go deeper.
And potential biases.
Absolutely. And speaking of biases, one area that often gets overlooked but is absolutely crucial to understand, especially for those of you focusing on international relations, is the inherent gender bias present in a lot of classic Western political thought.
Yeah, it's like they were looking at the world.
It's like they were looking
through this very specific lens.
Through a very specific lens.
That often excluded or marginalized the experiences and perspectives of women.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thinkers like Aristotle, Rousseau,
even Hegel,
despite their insights, often reinforced traditional gender roles and downplayed women's capabilities.
It's almost as if they couldn't imagine a world where women were equal participants in politics.
Equal participants.
Aristotle, for example, believed that women were just naturally inferior to men.
Naturally inferior.
And best suited for the home.
For the domestic sphere.
And Rousseau, despite his emphasis on individual liberty, believed that women's primary role was to please men.
Please men.
And raise children.
And raise children.
He saw women as emotional and incapable of rational thought.
Incapable of rational thought.
Which, in his view, meant that they couldn't participate in politics.
Disqualified them.
It's a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained these patriarchal views were.
Yes.
But even back then, there were those who dared to challenge these norms.
Yes.
Like those early liberals like John Stuart Mill.
They
were really ahead of their time.
Ahead of their time.
In advocating for women's rights. Mill's work, The Subjection of Women.
Yes.
It stands as this powerful indictment of traditional gender roles.
Powerful indictment.
And a passionate argument for women's equal participation in society.
Absolutely.
He argued that excluding women from education, politics, and the workforce not only harmed women, but it also deprived society. Of their talents and contributions. And this really paves the way. For the feminist movements that would later reshape the landscape of political thought. These movements forced a reassessment. Of the very foundations of traditional Western political thought. And challenged those male-centric assumptions about power, rights, and equality.
Which had dominated for centuries.
Yes.
So for you, as UPSC aspirants, especially those focusing on international relations, understanding these gender biases is really crucial. It's not just about recognizing these historical injustices. It's about understanding how these biases continue to shape those global power dynamics and influence international relations today.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point.
Yeah.
We can't analyze conflicts or negotiate treaties or effectively promote development if we're working with a limited or skewed understanding of gender roles and relations.
Exactly. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about another major critique of Western political thought. One that's particularly relevant for those of you aspiring to be diplomats and policymakers. Eurocentrism. Eurocentrism.
That tendency to view the world through a Western lens.
Yes.
And often dismissing or downplaying the contributions of other cultures and civilizations.
Precisely.
It's like assuming that the only map that matters
is
the one drawn from a European perspective.
Exactly. And this bias has had a profound impact on how we study and understand international relations. For centuries, Western political thought has been presented as the gold standard, the pinnacle of human intellectual achievement. But this ignores the rich and diverse traditions of political thought that existed.
In other parts of the world. Especially in those ancient civilizations.
Yes.
Like China and India. Ancient China, for example.
Yes.
Had a highly sophisticated system of governance.
It did.
With a complex understanding of power, legitimacy, and social order.
And the concept of the mandate of heaven, for instance,
Right.
provided a framework for understanding the legitimacy of rulers and the right to rebel against unjust or ineffective leadership.
And let's not forget Confucianism.
Yes, Confucianism.
With its emphasis on virtue, meritocracy, and the importance of social harmony.
The importance of social harmony.
I mean, these ideas have shaped Chinese society.
Absolutely.
And influenced political thought for millennia. And yet, they're often given short shrift in Western-centric accounts of political history.
They are.
And in India, you have this treasure trove of ancient texts.
You do.
Like the Arthashastra and
Manusmriti.
That offer these profound insights into statecraft, diplomacy, and the art of governance.
The Arthashastra, for example, written by Kautilya, a brilliant strategist and advisor, is a comprehensive treatise on political realism.
Wow.
Offering practical advice on everything from managing the economy to waging war to conducting diplomacy.
It's amazing how these rich traditions of political thought
It's mind-boggling.
were often sidelined or ignored in the West. And it led to this skewed and incomplete understanding of global politics.
And this Eurocentric bias isn't just a relic of the past.
Right.
It continues to influence contemporary debates and shape policy decisions.
I see it all the time.
We see it in the way certain conflicts are framed and the assumptions about which countries are developed or civilized.
Right.
and in the tendency to impose Western solutions on non-Western problems.
So for our UPSC aspirants,
yes,
especially those tackling those international relations questions,
absolutely.
How can they demonstrate this nuanced understanding of Eurocentrism and its impact?
That's a great question.
What kind of concrete examples could they use in their answers?
One approach is to directly challenge Eurocentric assumptions by highlighting the contributions of non-Western political thought. For example, if a question asks about the evolution of democracy, a student could mention ancient Athens, but they should also discuss the participatory decision-making processes in some indigenous cultures, or the concept of public opinion in ancient China.
So it's not about dismissing Western political thought altogether.
No, not at all.
But about placing it within a broader global context.
Absolutely.
And recognizing that diversity of ideas and systems that have shaped human history.
Exactly. Another way to demonstrate this understanding is to critique the application of Western models in non-Western contexts. For example, a student could discuss the challenges of imposing liberal democracy in societies that lack the necessary institutions or cultural values.
They could even bring up specific examples.
Absolutely.
Like the difficulties faced in establishing democratic institutions in Afghanistan or Iraq after Western interventions.
Perfect examples.
It's about showcasing an awareness of the complexities and the potential pitfalls of a one-size-fits-all approach to political development.
Absolutely. And remember, the UPSC examiners aren't just looking for regurgitated facts and theories. They're looking for critical thinking, analytical depth, and the ability to connect the dots between history, culture, and contemporary global issues.
It's about demonstrating that you're not just a passive consumer of information. You're an active learner who can engage with complex ideas and apply them to real-world situations.
And let's not forget the importance of examples.
They are important.
They're like the spices that bring your answers to life.
They make them more memorable?
More memorable.
More persuasive.
They're the difference between a bland dish and a culinary masterpiece. So when discussing Eurocentrism, a student could talk about the way Western media often portrays certain regions or conflicts through a very specific lens, perpetuating stereotypes and distorting perceptions.
Or they could discuss how international organizations, often dominated by Western powers, tend to prioritize certain issues or solutions over others, reflecting a particular worldview or set of interests.
It's all about perspective. The key is to choose examples that are relevant. Insightful
and demonstrate a deep understanding of the topic.
Precisely. Now, before we move on to the contemporary relevance of all this, let's take a moment to emphasize one more crucial point. For those UPSC exams, don't be afraid to draw connections between historical ideas and current events.
It's like saying, don't just study the past in a vacuum. See how it's breathing and pulsing in the present. After all, that's what makes political theory so fascinating.
And so relevant. Exactly. So if you're discussing Machiavelli's ideas about power and statecraft, for instance, you could connect them to the current geopolitical landscape, analyzing how states are using similar tactics to advance their interests.
You could even bring in specific examples.
Absolutely.
Like the ongoing tensions between the U.S. and China, or the role of realpolitik in international diplomacy.
The point is to demonstrate that you're not just memorizing historical figures and theories, but that you're actively engaging with them. Making connections. And drawing insights that are relevant to the world around you.
It's about showing that you're a critical thinker.
A critical thinker.
Can bridge that gap between theory and practice. Between the past and the present. And that's exactly what the UPSC examiners are looking for.
Now, with that in mind, let's delve into how these critiques of Western political thought shape our understanding of the world today.
How do these limitations and biases we've been discussing inform our approach to contemporary issues like globalization, technological change, and the rise of new powers?
Well, for one thing, they challenge us to move beyond simplistic binaries and embrace complexity. The world is not neatly divided into good and bad ideologies or systems of government.
Right.
There are shades of gray, multiple perspectives, and often the most effective solutions lie in understanding and navigating those nuances.
It's like realizing that the world isn't a two-dimensional map.
It's not.
It's this multi-layered, constantly shifting landscape.
But constantly shifting.
And we need to be able to read the contours, understand the interconnectedness of all these different forces, and adjust our course accordingly.
Exactly. And this is especially important in the field of international relations.
Where we're dealing with this complex web of actors, interests, and power dynamics.
We can't afford to rely on outdated assumptions or simplistic frameworks.
We can't.
We need to be able to analyze situations from multiple perspectives. Taking into account the historical context, cultural differences, and the evolving nature of power.
And this is where those critiques of Western political thought come in handy.
Right.
They provide us with this critical lens through which to view the world, helping us to question assumptions, identify biases, and challenge conventional wisdom.
They remind us that there's no one-size-fits-all solution
to
these complex challenges that we face. What works in one context might not work in another.
Exactly.
And we need to be sensitive to those differences. As we navigate the global landscape. It's like being a detective, you know? Constantly looking for clues, questioning the evidence.
You can't just accept things at face value.
You can't.
You need to dig deeper. You got to look for hidden biases.
Look for those hidden biases.
And consider alternative explanations.
And consider those alternative explanations precisely. And that's where a deep understanding of political theory, both its strengths and its limitations, becomes essential.
It does.
It's not just about acquiring knowledge. It's about developing those critical thinking skills to analyze, interpret, and apply that knowledge in a constantly evolving world.
So for our UPSC aspirants, it's not just about memorizing names and dates.
It's not just about memorizing.
It's about developing that critical lens. That ability to see the world through multiple perspectives. And understand how ideas shape actions. How history informs the present. And how all these different cultural and philosophical traditions have contributed to this rich tapestry. Of global political thought.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, let's touch on a couple of areas we haven't really had time to explore in detail, but that are incredibly relevant to your understanding of contemporary international relations.
Okay, so what are some of those emerging trends or challenges that our future diplomats and policymakers
should have on their radar?
Well,
one area that's really transforming the landscape of international relations is the impact of technology. The rise of the internet, social media, artificial intelligence is fundamentally altering the way we communicate, interact, and even think about power.
It's like we've entered this whole new dimension.
It's like a whole new dimension.
Where the rules of the game are still being written. And for those who want to shape the future of international relations, understanding these technological shifts and their implications is absolutely crucial.
Exactly. Think about it. Social media can be such a powerful tool for mobilizing social movements and promoting democratic values. But it can also be used to spread misinformation. So discord and undermine political stability and the rise of artificial intelligence raises all sorts of ethical and practical questions about the future of warfare, the role of automation in decision-making, and even the very nature of human agency in a world that's increasingly driven by algorithms.
That's a great point.
These are complex issues with no easy answers, and they highlight the need for innovative thinking, interdisciplinary collaboration, and a willingness to adapt to this rapidly changing landscape.
So it's a call to action.
It is.
For our UPSC aspirants. Don't just study the past.
No.
Look to the future.
Anticipate challenges.
Anticipate those challenges. And be prepared to think outside the box.
Think outside the box.
To come up with solutions that are both effective and ethically sound.
Absolutely. Another area worth exploring is the relationship between political theory and practice.
Right.
We've talked about the limitations and biases of Western political thought,
right.
but how do these ideas translate into action?
Right.
How do theoretical frameworks inform policy decisions?
Right.
And how can we bridge the gap between the ivory tower of academia and the messy realities of the political world?
It's like the age-old question. How do we make theory relevant to the real world?
To the real world.
And for those aspiring to careers in diplomacy, policymaking, or international development. This is a question. You'll be grappling with. Throughout your professional lives.
Think about it this way.
Okay.
You can have the most brilliant ideas about promoting democracy, resolving conflicts, or tackling poverty.
Right.
But if you can't translate those ideas into concrete policies, build consensus, and navigate the complexities of power and bureaucracy, they'll remain just that.
They'll just be ideas. So it's not just about being well-versed in political theory.
It's not just about the theory.
It's also about understanding the art of persuasion.
The art of persuasion.
The importance of building relationships. And the practicalities of implementing change. Within existing systems.
Exactly. And this is where skills like critical thinking, communication, negotiation, and cultural sensitivity become as important as theoretical knowledge. The UPSC exams, with their emphasis on analytical essays and in-depth interviews, are designed to assess not just your knowledge, but also your ability to think on your feet, articulate your ideas persuasively, and demonstrate those practical skills necessary to navigate the complex world of international relations.
So as you continue your UPSC preparations, don't just focus on memorizing facts and figures.
Don't just memorize.
Engage with the ideas, debate them with your peers. And think about how they connect to the world around you. Attend seminars, join study groups, and seek out mentors.
Find those mentors
who can guide you on this intellectual journey.
Absolutely. And remember, the world of international relations is constantly evolving.
It is.
New challenges are emerging. Old assumptions are being challenged. And the need for innovative thinking and creative problem solving has never been greater.
That's a great point.
This deep dive has given you a framework for understanding the limitations and critiques of Western political thought, but it's just the beginning of your exploration.
It is.
As you delve deeper into international relations, keep asking questions. Challenge conventional wisdom.
And be open. To diverse perspectives.
Because that's how true understanding emerges.
And that's how you will equip yourself. To make a real difference in the world. Remember, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
It does.
And today, you've taken that step. You've started to develop that critical lens, that nuanced understanding of global political thought. That will set you apart. As future leaders. And change makers. So keep exploring. Keep learning. And keep pushing the boundaries of your knowledge.
Keep pushing those boundaries.
The world needs your insights.
Your passion.
And your commitment to building a more just and equitable global order.
Absolutely.
And if this deep dive has sparked some aha moments for you, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And share this episode with your fellow UPSC aspirants.
Share it with your friends.
We're here to support you on this journey.
We are.
One deep dive at a time.
One deep dive at a time.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.